Um, I know, I know we were talking about the nutrition assistance eligibility factors before I lost connectivity here. We were talking about, so we have to verify identification, and then U.S. citizen or qualified non-citizen status to receive benefits. Individuals that do not meet that criteria may still apply on behalf of others that do, and the same with the Social Security number, with providing or applying for a Social Security number. And then I know we were talking about the gross income. For most households that don't include anybody 60 years of age or older, or have anybody with a disability as defined in the SNAP program federal rules, they have to meet the gross income test, which is under 130% of the federal poverty level. If the household does have somebody that is either 60 or older, or does have a qualified disability under the SNAP program rules, only the net income test applies, which is 100% of the federal poverty level. And that net income is determined by subtracting the allowable program deductions from the gross income. Arizona does have another thing that we call expanded categorical eligibility. So for expanded categorical eligibility, the household may still be eligible if their income is 185% of the federal poverty level, and they don't have anybody in the budgetary unit or household that's disqualified for any reason. So they would take their income and calculate whether they were eligible for a benefit based on their income. Sometimes households that are categorically eligible, they may not qualify for a benefit allotment. However, if they have school-age children, they may still be eligible for school lunch, free or reduced price school lunches, as long as they're getting some type of benefit. Oh, I need to clarify that. They actually do, I'm sorry, they actually do have to be getting a paid benefit to be eligible for the free or reduced price school lunches. For households that are not categorically eligible, the resource test is $2,750 a month, unless they include an elderly individual or somebody with a disability. Then they have a higher resource limit. If that's the case, $4,250 a month. And there are work requirements for adults unless they're exempt. So next slide. So let's see. We go to the next slide then. Okay.
Okay. Did it go? Okay.
Yeah. That's fine. Eligibility and benefit amounts are determined on a household basis. So the household includes spouses, children under age 22, and anyone else who lives together and purchases and prepares meals together. Benefits amounts are based on household size, income, and allowable deductions from income. Households that include at least one person who is 60 years or older, or has been determined to have a disability as defined by the program rules, get special considerations when calculating income and resource eligibility. So when I say as defined by the program rules, you might be wondering, well, what is that? So basically, the program rules define having a disability in terms of, does that person receive a federal benefit that's tied to a disability, or would they be eligible for that benefit if they're not necessarily getting paid that benefit? So that's in the technical regulations on that. And then we'll talk about cash assistance overview next. Let's see. We can move to the next one for cash assistance.
Because I did move it.
Huh. Okay, there it is. So in addition to income, probably the biggest driver of eligibility for temporary assistance for needy families, cash assistance, is there must be a child that's being applied for that is deprived of parental support. And so the deprivation of parental support may exist through any of the following: continued absence of a parent. So the parent has been or is expected to be out of the home 30 days or more. The death of a parent or the disability of a parent that affects their ability to support or care for a dependent child. So that disability doesn't necessarily have to be a permanent disability. It does need to be something that would impact them for 30 days or longer. And then there's also households with two parents in the home can receive benefits based on the unemployment or underemployment of a parent. And then to qualify for the program, the primary caretaker that lives with and applies for the child must be living with a parent or one of the following. So it could be a non-parent relative, which would be a sibling, grandparent, aunt, uncle, niece, nephew, cousin, step-parent, and so on. An unrelated adult when the child has been placed in their care by the Department of Child Safety, a tribal court, or tribal welfare agency, or an unrelated legal permanent guardian when the LPG or legal permanent guardian was appointed by any court during a dependency hearing or proceeding. I won't be able to break this down into a lot of detail for you, but there are basically two parts in the income test. There's a preliminary test they call the needy family test, and then they also have to look at the eligibility compared to the cash assistance payment standard. The needy family test is 130% of the federal poverty level monthly for a non-parent that's applying for the child only. So within cash assistance, the adult has the option of not applying for their own needs. And we have that a lot with when it's a non-parent relative. They'll apply strictly for the child, and if they can pass the needy family test, they can receive benefits for the child without their income being counted. 100% of the federal poverty level when the parent is applying, or a non-parent relative is applying for themselves as well as the child. We don't use the needy family test for kinship foster care applications. And those are those applications that typically are referred to us through the Department of Child Safety. The cash assistance payment standard is based on the number of people applying and whether the household has to pay for housing. And I think we have links here for what the payment standard is. It's very low in Arizona right now. As you can see, A1 refers to housing, refers to a household that does have a housing obligation, either mortgage or rent. And those are the payment standards based on the number of eligible participants. And they would actually, these tables are for households with zero countable income. So you can see the amounts are not the most generous that we've ever seen, but nonetheless, that's what it is right now for Arizona. And then there's A2 payment standards. Those are for households without a housing obligation. And so that's the income tables there. And so let's see, I think, oh, and next slide.
Stuck.
Uh-oh.
Let's try that again. Ooh, that's better. One moment. Let me find the slides.
Yeah, sure.
Are you currently seeing it in slideshow mode or out of it? I'm looking at out of it probably.
Yeah, I think it's out of it right now.
Okay. Then let me try that again and resume here.
Okay, yeah,
There
there
we
it
go.
is. Okay, and then we could go to, yeah, okay, great. So cash, the other thing I need to say about cash assistance benefits, they are time limited. The Arizona time limit is referred to as the cash assistance state benefit limit state, or we call it STBL. Some people call it stable. The state benefit limit in Arizona is 12 countable months. There are exceptions to that. If somebody has been receiving benefits in their first 12 months and they comply with all the work requirements and don't get sanctioned for not cooperating with the work activities, they may be eligible for an additional 12-month extension. There's also hardship extensions. So, and then there is also a federal lifetime benefit limit, which is 60 months. So that might come into play for somebody that hasn't resided in Arizona, that's coming in from another state. We would have to look at how many months that they've received benefits. So next slide. And
You're
then it's
off the hook
Julie's turn.
again. Great. Thank you, Chris. Let
Oh,
me
thank you. Thank you for
adjust
your.
mine and we'll move on to I'm going to start just like Chris did with the general conditions of eligibility. And this would be for all access programs because we have about 18 of them. And that's just the core program. Sometimes there's sub programs within the core programs. But as a general sense, there's a lot of different access programs, but these are the general conditions that apply to all of them. So we need a valid application that's at the very least at the beginning, information about who's applying, a way to contact them, a signature, a dated signature. And then once they've completed the application, we need the information, any proof that's needed, and basic information for eligibility. So the primary components are you need to be a resident of Arizona. That means that could include somebody who is currently here and living here. It could also include somebody who is temporarily away from the state. It could be for business, it could be for schooling, it could be for a number of things. But as long as they still are an Arizona resident and have the plan to return to Arizona once the business in the other state is completed and they don't apply for benefits in the other state, they can remain, they are considered an Arizona resident and can remain on access. Social Security number comes with the same general caveats with a minor distinction as the other programs. A person who is legally able to get a Social Security number must provide one if they are applying for benefits for themselves. If they cannot legally obtain a Social Security number, they don't have to provide one. And if they're not applying for themselves, they do not have to provide their Social Security number. And this one goes hand in hand with the next one about US citizens and qualified non-citizens. So if the person is not a US citizen or a qualified non-citizen, and there are multiple statuses, they could still qualify for a limited benefit that is you'll most often see referred to as emergency services. And federal emergency services is specific to those emergency services for people that are not US citizens and don't hold a qualified non-citizen status. And it is intended to cover literally emergency medical conditions that would generally present in an emergency department that a reasonable person would think would result in loss of life, limb, or major health impacts. So those are potentially covered services, but they don't get the full continuity of care that other access members would that do meet these two criteria. So that's their full service benefit package versus a very limited one. But there is still a benefit potentially for Access members that do not meet those. Another current condition of eligibility is if they qualify for a cash benefit that they're entitled to. That could be Social Security, survivor's benefits, disability benefits, a pension, unemployment insurance, then they have to apply for and accept those benefits. The last one is assignment of rights to medical benefits in Arizona. That is extremely easy because it occurs under operation of law. And that information is on the application that if you apply for access and we approve you and cover a benefit, that your rights to any third-party liability, like payment for the same benefit that we covered, is assigned to the state. That's all that is. The customer doesn't have to do anything specific to comply with that one. Okay, so let's talk about some of our programs. There are over a dozen program categories, and these are just some primary headers. So there's program categories for adults that don't meet any of the below. There's programs for children. There's programs specifically for families, seniors, people with disabilities, pregnant women, people that have aged out of the foster care system. That's what we mean by former foster youth. And then there are specific programs to help cover the costs of Medicare premiums. And there is one program that also will pay for Medicare coinsurances and deductibles. That is called the Qualified Medicare Beneficiary. So those are Medicare savings programs, and there's 3 of those. So we have multitudes of programs, and they all have additional criteria. So there's the general criteria, but to qualify for specific ones, you have to meet some of the additional. For example, if you look at this list, you have the bullet number 4, seniors and people with disabilities. You can probably guess that the criteria to qualify for those programs are you need to be over a certain age or have a disability. And for the access programs, that disability is in the form of determined by Social Security, passed for Altex, the pre-admission screening, that's the medical need screening that I talked about earlier. Or there is also a third disability avenue, and this is for people that have been designated as having a serious mental illness that is currently takes the place of a Social Security disability determination for our what we call our SSI medical assistance only program. It's based on SSI rules. It's based on a disability criteria, and a person with a serious mental illness designation can meet the disability requirement for that program. Pregnant women, you got to be pregnant. So as you can see, a lot of them are kind of self-explanatory. But as an example, I'm going to give you a preview of a snip of a document that is linked in the resources page. And this gives you it's a handy little tool to give you some general information about what are the programs. It'll include where to apply for them. And because of the limited space, the how to apply slide from this deck is far more comprehensive and gives you far more options, as well as any other special criteria that are specific to the program. Like you will see in the 4th row under children, that's the kids care program. There's some extra criteria for kids care that don't apply to the other 3 programs. And then as noted, there's coverage for individuals, but this is a multi-page document. I'm only kind of putting it out here to show you this is included in your resources, and it goes much further. There are multiple pages to give you a general overview of these are our programs. These are the types of criteria that would help somebody to qualify. But I would note it will give you an income limit. I would never use this to screen somebody out necessarily unless it is so clear. Because this income criteria is based on countable income, and not all income is counted for access programs. There are certain income types that are excluded for all access programs because it's a matter of federal law. One of them being, I'm not going to be able to come up with the word of it, and my apologies, because I had a great example and it just flew out of my brain. But there are specific payments. There are certain payments to American Indians that are excluded by federal law from being counted in any federal program. So this is more of a baseline, but with the understanding that these are often net tests, that there are deductions that may apply for the person, as well as not all income is countable. So I wouldn't use it ever as a hard and fast rule that you don't qualify because your income is $3 more.
Thanks, Julie. I think that's
Yes.
a fabulous resource that I want to keep folks tuned in on. We actually had a question about that.
Yes.
But I wasn't sure if you had just a few, if this was the last slide. I do want to give
It's pretty
some time for
close.
questions. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm going to zip through the last few just to show you what they are, but we will be providing the slide deck, and I'm sorry that we went a little over, technical difficulties and all, but this gives you an overview of the kinds of budgeting information and how income might be counted. I did an overview of access covered services. There was a specific question about, I'm confused. Some people say that glasses and dental are covered, and some people say they aren't. Well, the key is if you are under the age of 21, they are covered. If you are over the age of 21, they are not. It is under the what we call the EPSDT benefit. So for people under 21, there are extra benefits that they get. Additional benefits for Altex, limited services. We touched upon that with FES and Medicare savings. This will all be coming to you. And then we have our resources. So let us roll right to questions.
Fabulous. Yes. And thank you for being flexible and kind of breezing
Absolutely.
through those. I think, yeah, in general, I love the point that you made about income and not screening folks out. And maybe ultimately erring on the side of trying to kind of put the application through using that chart as a guide and letting kind of, you know, the powers that be kind of make the final determination. Is that a fair sort of assessment?
Absolutely. Because you never know. We have some programs that only look at one person's income. Our Freedom to Work Buy-in program, for example, this is a program for people that are working and have a disability as determined by Social Security. So this is their opportunity to make a little more money up front and adjust to that switch off of Social Security and into the regular work life. They can earn quite a bit more money, and only their own income counts against them. Only earned income and only their own. So if they have a spouse in the home, it doesn't matter. So there are dozens of, it feels like dozens. It's actually probably less than 20, but there's a lot of programs and each one has their own rules. I would always suggest err on the side of caution. The worst we say is no, but you already have a no if you don't apply.
Yeah. And you might have a clearer picture of why.
Yep.
That's great. And that answered Jamie's question, I think, head on there ultimately. I do want to jump back to a couple questions from earlier on.
Sure.
Some agencies were actually interested in finding out how they could become part of a DOTS site. And someone responded that Don Jones at azdes.gov might be the best contact, the community engagement liaison, if interested in becoming part
Yes,
of the
she probably
network.
would be a very good contact. Yes.
Perfect. And then around that, would any of those sites be able to help folks applying for unemployment insurance as well?
I'm not sure what are you talking about, like DS on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that the caseworkers that Family Assistance Administration has are not trained in processing unemployment insurance applications. So I don't know, like if some of those multi-service centers, if they I would need to check with unemployment, part of DES, to see if they send any staff out to offsite locations to assist individuals applying for unemployment.
Andy, you'll want to come off mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Another question was regarding the application for benefits for an incarcerated individual. If the medical case manager completed that application, someone was wondering if that number can still be used. And I'm wondering if they're referring to the application ID or their access ID for an incarcerated individual.
Well, if the access ID, absolutely, that number stays, generally does not change for the rest of ever. It is meant to be a member identification number and to stick with the person, whether or not they're on benefits. If they come in after a 5-year gap, that would still be the same number we would assign to them. Now, if an application was submitted through Healthy Arizona Plus and it's out there pending, absolutely, we're going to disposition the application. You may also be talking about, there's a Healthy Arizona Plus ID, which is also a unique member ID. That one does stick with the member too.
Great. So it sounds like there's a lot of consistency there. And I think we
are trying. Yes.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think a couple questions around folks that may be incarcerated in that really nice streamlined process that you all have around that. So just clarifying that within that 24 to 72 hour time frame for reinstatement of benefits, is that happening automatically through access? Or are there additional steps that the individual needs to take upon release to initiate that?
Generally speaking, so let me both sides. So for the reinstatement process, it is automatic. We don't touch it. The customer doesn't touch it. It happens through a file match. We receive the file match that says this person that we currently have suspended has been released, and we update their enrollment in a batch file, and we send that information to their health plan. So that's automatic. When they're doing a pre-release application with AHCCCS or with a county, in many cases, as long as we don't need anything additional, and in many cases we don't, if we have enough information to identify them, they've ever been on benefits before, we normally have everything we need minus maybe income, and people coming out of carceral settings may not have any. So an initial application in that respect often can be auto adjudicated as well, where the customer may never need to do anything until maybe their next renewal, or if they have a change in circumstances that they need to report. So a lot of them can be auto adjudicated without additional information from the customer.
Audio, Andy?
So sorry about that. Get it right one of these days. Amy was curious about, she's heard of letters being sent to folks' release address requesting information, but oftentimes the application is denied because maybe the member was still incarcerated and they weren't able to respond. Can a case manager submit a letter when doing an application that someone is incarcerated and report the release date to prevent any denials?
In some cases, yes, that can be difficult. Go ahead, Chris. You could speak to the FAA side.
Oh, I was going to say for FAA, we're permitted to take up to 30 days to process a nutrition assistance SNAP benefit application. So if we knew that they were still being kept at the facility, then we wouldn't be able to issue the benefits until they were released, but we could hold the application until they were released.
Okay.
All right. And that gave me just enough time to kind of bring my brain back around to a potential way to resolve that issue for people that if they're doing the application in Healthy Arizona Plus, that letter will be automatically generated in many cases. There are a couple of options depending on the case manager and what they can and can't do. So one thing is, as you're inputting it, there comes up, the letter is usually available immediately to identify what do we need and be able to, okay, if you know that it's going to ask for something, start working on getting it. Even though the letter is going to go out to the release address and may not be responded to from there, there is still the opportunity to tell the customer, this is what we need. How can we work on getting that for you? How can we assist you? How can somebody else assist you? It's more of a coordination at that point. The other pieces depend, and I have not ever seen this happen. I'm just saying that from just a purely would it work perspective, you could put a mailing address temporarily in there and the letter will come to where, if you wanted, the case manager said, send it to me. I'm currently working with this person on their behalf. Send it to me, send it to them, however it would get to them. We can do that, could happen as well. And then it's just a matter of remembering to change that mailing address when they are released so that the mail will then go to the residential address. So
Awesome.
they're not perfect options,
Yeah.
but there are coordination ways to get around it.
Okay. Perfect. And I know we had our time glitch, but just in general, as a catch-all for folks that do need to hop off, is there a good sort of general inbox that folks with additional follow-up questions can ask if we don't get to them today?
Or let me pull that one. I was going to do that ahead of time and then everything happened and I completely forgot to do it. All righty, I am going to look for that.
Okay.
Actually, at this point, you have my email address. Let's start with mine for general questions, and I'll pass stuff off to DES as needed. But
Okay.
let's just start with mine.
Okay, no problem. And if we get it later, perhaps we can provide it to Linda as she sends out.
Yes, that would be
the
great.
slides. Because I think there's, a lot of sort of one-off scenarios that folks are kind of experiencing.
Yes.
They're submitting applications, but just wondering kind of broadly, can you touch on the ABAWD requirements?
That would be on the DES side of things. So
Yep.
ABAWD is able-bodied adults without dependents. So as the name implies, that's for households where there's no dependent children in the home. And basically what it is it's a time limit for the nutrition assistance benefit. They're the individuals that fall into that category that don't have an exemption from that policy are limited to 3 months of nutrition assistance benefits within a 36-month period. However, we have been approved for a waiver through the Food and Nutrition Service. So most areas of the state are not subject to the time limit policy. The only area of the state that is subject to the time limit policy is Maricopa County. That's because Maricopa County tends to have a higher employment rate. And so any non-tribal lands within Maricopa County are basically the only people that are potentially subject to the able-bodied adult without dependent time limit. And so there are a variety of individual exemptions at the individual level as well for that, even for people that live in Maricopa County. So like if you're under the age of 18 or you're over the age of 53, you're going to have an age exemption. There's exemptions for disability. There's exemptions for I'm required to be a caretaker for somebody else in my home, that kind of thing. So there's a variety. I'm not physically fit. I'm not mentally fit to participate in employment right now, that kind of thing. So that's where it is right now. It's a little bit of a change from last year where we had the whole state was not subject to the time limit. So, but right now it's just individuals within Maricopa County that are not on tribal lands.
Okay. And I think we are at time. I'm not sure if folks can hang on for a little bit. We can maybe try to get to a few more, but I do want to be respectful, keeping in mind folks might have some other meetings to get to. So again, thank you everyone, especially Chris and Julie for providing this information. And to you all participants in kind of sticking with us today. Obviously, it's super important information. So thank you all again. With that, I'll pass it to Linda for any final words from the coalition.
Thanks to Andy, Julie, and Christopher, and all of you for participating. We are going to keep the recording going, and if Julie and Christopher have a little bit more time, we'll get to a few more questions, if that's cool with you. But for those of you who need to go, please know that you'll be getting the recording, actually 2 recordings, because we did it in 2 pieces, and the slides. So we want to make sure that you continue to stay connected to resources, and obviously Julie and Christopher are resources for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Andy, and we'll just, for those of you who can hang out a little bit longer, we'll try to get to some more questions.
I'm willing to, yeah, I can stick around a little while longer. I don't have any
I
meeting
can
coming up.
too.
All right. Look at that. We'll keep the party going. I think this is a good question, specific, but also I think in general. So someone applying for access, this one person is a legal resident while the other is undocumented, the spouse. How should they apply? Is just the legal resident eligible? Or is the
I definitely have an answer for you there. Yeah, this is a great question, because it does bring up part of the policy that is, it's harder to review in a slide in a generic situation. Absolutely, both can apply. The person that does not have a legal status does not have to state anything other than they don't want to provide their status, which also means that they do not need to provide a social security number. Now, that person that doesn't have the qualified status, if they're approved, they would just need to meet all the other requirements that anybody else would. Their benefit package would be limited to emergency services, but there is a benefit. So if there's an emergent need, a car accident, some sort of catastrophic event, it's not going to bankrupt the family. So it is still a benefit, and they can still qualify. The only difference being that they don't need to meet those 2 criteria. If they have a social, yes, they should provide it, because it makes verifying income and residency a lot easier. But if they don't, that is fine. We don't need them to answer that piece of the question.
Awesome. Few folks, this has come up a couple times regarding employment verification. Folks not being able to verify due to lack of communication from the former employer, but ultimately their benefits were denied or unable to move forward because they weren't able to maybe provide what was asked of them. Any direction in those
Yeah, I can.
instances?
Did you want to speak first, or do?
Oh, no, go ahead, Chris, you go first. And if you haven't covered anything, I'm sure that I'll have something to say.
So within Family Assistance Administration, FAA, we understand that there's going to be situations like that where, like, maybe somebody left their job, not on the best of terms with their former employer. And so what we do is there's a variety of ways we can handle that. Like if the individual is willing to sign a release form, we can send that into the former employer to get verification on paper, or if they're willing to authorize our caseworker to call, then the worker should offer to assist by contacting the employer, as long as the person that's applying is okay with that contact taking place. And then as a last resort, like sometimes like the employer, they don't want to talk to the person they just released, and they don't want to talk to our caseworker either. So if it gets to one of those type of situations where the person applying can't get the information, the caseworker can't get the information, we would typically have the person write down the facts to their best of their recollection on what happened. Say October 5th was my last day. They fired me because they said I went on a break too long, or whatever, whatever it was. And then my last check was right around this amount, and I got it on whatever date it was, that type of thing. And then sign and date. And like in those situations with with supervisory approval and everything, they can use the participants' declaration of the facts as the basis for approving the eligibility if they meet all the rules, all the other qualifying guidelines.
Okay, great.
And I will just add to that a little bit, because I want to address the temporary staffing type issue, because, in many cases, unless the customer has said, I don't ever want to work for you again, and even then, sometimes it's hard to get off of their roles, you're still listed as an active employee, you just haven't gotten any assignments. So in addition to this, the statement is critical, absolutely critical. And I would tell, I am a temporary employee, I have not received any assignments since blank. I cannot, and here's a critical one, sort of the piece that kind of lends that keys the eligibility worker in to, oh, hey, this is a situation where I may be able to use the customer statement, is they've tried to get it, they can't get it, say so. I have contacted the employer, they will not write me anything in writing. They told me to go look in the work number, which is where we find them anyway. And we have policy in our manual that specifically states, don't just look for, yep, it shows an active employment. What does the last 30 days income show? In those cases where the person hasn't worked for a while, it's going to show a 0.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. It's not going to count anyway. All they need to do is put the information in writing and say, I can't get you anything different. This is the situation. And Chris is absolutely right. That should be able to allow for the case to move forward.
Awesome. Can you just touch on the Freedom to Work program? Somebody mentioned SMI, but I don't think that it's a program specifically for SMI folks, unless, I guess, please.
Right. It is not. It is a program for people with disabilities that are working. And it is designed to give them a higher income limit so that they don't have to choose between working and losing critical coverage and benefits that would outweigh the benefit of working. So I make $2,000, but if I lose my access or I lose all these other things, I'm worse off. Yeah. And so it's an incentive to allow people to go back to work rather than the previous state of being a disincentive to work. It is not specific to people with SMI designations. It is, I believe the current one is, in fact, I'm pretty sure it does not currently allow us to substitute. I will have to look. That will be one of my follow-up questions. I don't believe that the SMI designation is a substitute for disability determination for freedom to work. I know it is for our SSI medical assistants only. I don't believe it is for freedom to work, but I'll look that up and confirm.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to touch on, that folks might want to continue to explore, because you're right. I mean, you hear that misnomer, right? Well, if I start
Yeah.
working, I'm going to lose all my benefits. Well, I think there's more of a conversation to be had there, because it's just not that black and white.
Right. And I will add you a resource on that one. I haven't looked at it in a little while, but when it was being developed, and Chris also worked on this particular resource, there is a platform out there called Disability Benefits 101. And there is an Arizona version that has a calculator. And as you put information in there, it can calculate the impact on different benefits for you. It is a great tool. I don't know if they're still updating it. As of a year or two ago, they were. But if it's still out there, I cannot say enough good about it.
Yep. I definitely think DB 101 is still out there, and definitely would encourage that kind of research as well.
Right. And we've tested it. It's very, very accurate.
Awesome. Last question. Are there any changes to youth that are aging out of foster care receiving benefits, or?
Yeah, actually, most of them have already been put in place. So the Support Act of, when was that one? Was it 2000 and? I don't even remember. I'm not even going to pretend that I do. I'm going to just put it out there that the Support Act made some changes to really help break down barriers for former foster youth. One of the big ones is specific to former foster youth that aged out of care in other states. Prior to this past year, January 1st of this year, no, I want to say it was prior to January 1st of this upcoming year, or it was last year. My brain is just not working. We have about 8 different projects going, all of them on a January 1st, that Access did not previously cover kids that aged out of foster care in another state, unless we had placed them there as former foster youth for our young adult transitional insurance. It was last year. But with the Support Act, it became mandatory. And we have requested a waiver because the mandatory statute limited it to kids that aged out on or after January 1st of 2023. And there are still former foster youth out there that aged out prior to that, and it didn't seem equitable. So we have asked for that waiver. We're still waiting for it, but we have implemented anticipating approval. Quiet, quiet, hush, hush. I didn't say that in public. Of course I did. But we've asked for it, and we would have to make a change to our systems to undo it at this point. It just doesn't seem equitable otherwise.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Julie and Chris. I think that really covered most of our questions, if not all of them. I'm sure there's still ones that are lingering out there, or that folks will think about later on. If we just think about providing those general inbox resources that folks can reach out. I think there's a couple folks that have been great in the chat as well on some resources to access. So,
and as a quick follow-up, as I get stuff, if I get multiple questions, is there a way to put them all into a document and not just respond to that person, but potentially get them out there as a resource to other attendees? Because I'd be happy to do that. I'll just track them and send them out periodically.
Absolutely. We can be the distribution channel for that.
That's fantastic. I would be happy to do that then.
Thank you, Julie. All right. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate your
Yes.
Thank
time
you all very
and-
much.
And your
this was fun.
expertise. And we will continue to connect via email and make sure that resources are available for case managers who are doing their absolute best to make sure clients have
Right.
access to benefits.
Right.
Thank you.